Welcome to episode 45 of the Riviera Firefly podcast, where we're switching gears and taking a tiny break from the Christmas fair exhibitors to talk therapy and relationships. For the most, things are a little calmer after the crazy summer season, and as we approach winter, more reclusive times, still with family holidays and the change of season, and the new year of course, it can often be a good time to reflect a little and have a little bit of an inward search. Well, I found some quotes on an old Filofax which inspired me to set up this chat with local English-speaking therapist Gavin Sharp. He basically works in all things that are relationship and addiction. And in the social media world that we live in, we sometimes forget that life isn't perfect and that even the person behind the glossy Insta shots can, as my American friend says, have a dirty back end. Balls get dropped, people fall out, and the going can get really tough. And it gets tough for me too. It does for all of us. And knowing when to reach out, well, that's really important, which is why I'm really thrilled that I can bring this chat with Gavin to you now. Let's roll.
Having successfully launched 3 businesses, bilingual mum to 2 and entrepreneur Antonia Brown has connected with thousands of people, both French and international, since moving to the French Riviera. These connections allow her to speak to successful local businesses and inspirational people about life here on the Côte d'Azur and share it with you. Welcome to the Riviera Firefly podcast with your host, entrepreneur, and my mum, Antonia Brown.
Well, welcome to the Riviera Firefly podcast to Gavin Sharp.
Hello, and thank you very much for inviting me.
You're very welcome. And with the beauties of technology, I am over in Vallauris, but you're in a very beautiful part of the world. Whereabouts are you right now?
I am just outside. I'm a few meters from Monaco in Beausoleil.
We are being very glamorous down here in the south of France, which is very autumnal, blue sky. And we're all feeling good, which is perfect because today we're going to sort of talk about what you do. So livelovelearn.global is your website. And tell us, how would you describe what you're currently doing?
So I offer counselling and psychotherapy to the expat community here on the Riviera. So clients will come, I have a lot of clients that are on my doorstep. So clients from Monaco, Beausoleil, and then some will come in from a bit further afield because there aren't that many English-speaking therapists. So some come from Nice, Cannes, Antibes. And I offer a range of it's primarily counseling and psychotherapy. And if it's helpful, I can talk a little bit about the difference between the two. But really, I guess it's people coming in because they've got ordinary life problems, relationship problems, anxiety, stress, bereavement. And that's both kind of individuals and couples. And then, of course, being here because they're expats, that also comes with its set of issues in terms of having to fit into a new world and adapt and isolation and all that sort of stuff. So, and then I specialize, I do a lot of work around addiction. So that's both drink, substance addiction, and then a lot of the kind of cutting edge, more recent addiction around things like sex and love and pornography and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, well, I look forward to getting into that. So I know that we've got a couple of topics. We'll definitely talk about one this time. And the idea is that we'd probably get together and talk about another one and sort of break them up because they're really quite different subjects and themes. And I can see fantastic. The admin of Côte d'Azur Living, which is our community group, which has over 9,000 people in it now, from the entry-level questions. There are lots of people that feel really quite isolated and, you know, they've left their families and their friends and they set up here and sometimes that can go really well. And for many of us it does. But there's always, as in any life situation, sort of spanners that get thrown in the works. And I think for lots of people here with the language barrier, that's a huge issue to start with, finding a therapist, because you want to be so comfortable in your language. You know, my French is really good, but when I want to go and speak sort of technical stuff around medicine or what have you, I just kind of like being able to do it in my own mother tongue. So I imagine that lots of your clients must feel, you know, relieved that they can actually get it all off their shoulders in their own language.
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, your French is definitely better than mine because I can just about go and order a cup of coffee in a restaurant. So I empathise with those who struggle with the language. But you're right, it can be very isolating. Sometimes I find that if people have moved as a couple, it's very often because one person's work has taken them here, and sadly, and it's a podcast for a different day. It's often the man, and it's his work. And so therefore, what you're asking assuming a heterosexual couple, what you're asking the female spouse to do is, okay, well, hubby's at work and he's got his stuff. Not much has changed for him because he's doing what he was doing back home, wherever home is. And suddenly you've immersed this person into a world where she may, as you say, she may not speak the language, doesn't know any friends, and suddenly life is very different and can be very isolating, and can trigger a lot of emotions around depression and anxiety, things that maybe we didn't even know were there before, but we experience them now.
Yeah, and I guess the balance of power, for want of a better word, in the relationship, the dynamic can change. So like in that scenario, the female person will suddenly be a lot more vulnerable because they don't have their support network to draw on. They might not be able to go and do an activity or meet other people as easily as they could in their home country. And so I wondered one of the topics we were going to talk about, which I think is brilliant, is about relationships. And it sounds like we're sort of going into this, the unhealthy, destructive relationships. But when you do sort of say unhealthy, what is that really for you? What sort of deems something unhealthy?
That's a good question. It's something where I'm really dependent on the person sitting in front of me will tell me kind of what's working, what's not working. I don't have a personal judgment. So if a client comes in and says, hey, you know what, I'm in an open relationship, I'm not going to deem that I'm not making a personal judgment as to whether that's healthy or unhealthy. It's kind of, well, how's that working for you? But that said, I'd say there are certain signs that if someone is in you just mentioned, Antonia, the kind of the power relationship, if there is some kind of abuse of power in a relationship, if the relationship is requiring you to be perfect. I had a client not that long ago who was saying that, her partner was extremely, what's the word for it, was giving a lot of indications about what she should and shouldn't wear here in the south of France, was very controlling about that. Or sometimes we find that the relationship at the extreme end can become dangerous. And it's, or I'm thinking of other examples. Sometimes we have a relationship that maybe started that was very passionate, but it's become lifeless and we're feeling isolated. So all of those reasons, which, maybe when someone's listening in, it's kind of, well, hey, that's obvious. When we're in that relationship for all sorts of reasons, we've normalized the fact that he might be quite controlling, or that's how he exerts his power because it was always that way, or maybe it was that way when I was growing up. But then suddenly we're here, we're in the south of France, we have a lot of time, we're isolated, and those things suddenly shift into focus.
Yeah, and I think because I've met quite a few people through my work and I hear their stories. So I see lots of people where maybe the husband might work out at sea, the wife's at home with the baby, but she was the working woman before. And so not only is she adjusting to being the mum, the stay-at-home mum, which she loves, but then there's that whole sort of transformation that a woman goes through in that. Like you were saying earlier, for the man, it can stay fairly similar, although he's got this little baby, but he still goes back to do his day-to-day job. Sorry, did you want to add something in there? Yeah.
Well, the other thing that I hear all the time then that comes, both from men who are unhappy, but staying with this scenario from the women, is this expectation of what I call the shoulds. Well, I should be feeling better because there's 300 plus days of sunshine, or look at what a beautiful part of the world I'm living in. I shouldn't be feeling this way. And I will often say, just because, if I hold you out my window and I hold you upside down by your legs, you can probably see the sea. But that doesn't mean that it's a good session or that life is great. So the fact that you can see the sea from where you live or from my office, then so what? But we don't think like that. So we get very much caught into this sort of shame spiral, and we turn in on ourselves that, well, we should be more grateful. And it's just about saying, well, there is a place for gratitude, and there is a place to be able to step back and say, I've got some wonderful things in my life. But right now, at this moment, you're telling me that you feel quite lonely and isolated. And it doesn't matter how beautiful that sea is, that's where you are at the moment.
And I suppose it's even more magnified by social media than it ever has been before, because I'm a big Facebook user. I actually love Facebook, but I'm not someone that is going to hang my dirty washing out in public on Facebook. I just don't do that. I'm not also going to be too like, oh, my life's amazing. I do try and find, a little bit of balance, but to other people, they might think, oh gosh, she's always active. She's always this, she's always that. But we all have bad days. It just doesn't mean that I'm necessarily sharing it on Facebook. So I get that. And if I see other people's Instagram or whatever, I'm like, okay, cool, they're having a great time down the beach. But I can see how quickly you can be overwhelmed by seeing all these happy images of parties and outings, and you're maybe at home not joining in, that you can suddenly feel even more alone. It must have added to your workload incredibly, social media, right?
Absolutely. It's a great point. When was the last time that one of us posted or we read on social media, hey, I had really bad sex today with my spouse and I'm feeling really down and I don't want to get out of bed. We just don't tend to do that. As you say, it tends to be smiley picture. Here we are by the beach. Here we are in Saint-Tropez. And again, staying with our scenario, if I'm isolated and I don't have that much connection to real people, the chance I'm spending more time online. So what I'm seeing on social media isn't representative. So absolutely the impact of the likes of Facebook and like you, I'm a big fan, and I think it's a great way to stay in touch. So there are obviously positives, but at its extreme, it just makes us feel even more isolated.
Just in its defense, Facebook, if I sort of met you on the street and said to you, hi, Gavin, how are you? You would probably 99.9% of the time say to me, I'm fine. You don't sort of go into a whole long list of, well, my back hurts and I lost my job. We don't generally do that. The sort of etiquette is, I'm fine, thank you, how are you? And that's kind of the exchange that generally happens. It's over coffee with a friend. That's just a little aside in Facebook's defense.
No, I hadn't thought about it in that way, and I think it's a great way to think about it. But you're absolutely right.
And following the social media thing, I think I first sort of saw you appear in my radar, if you like, was all around the Me Too, hashtag Me Too, all the Harvey Weinstein, all that kind of stuff. And I think as a female, it's been really interesting in this period, watching what's happening, watching how things that were acceptable for many, many years, now suddenly, as a female, we're starting to go, well, it might have been that way. But so for guys, I think it might be really quite difficult because you're in this moving sand where things that were okay before that weren't necessarily always bad, but, like maybe, oh, can you change your skirt? Or, now we're sort of, well, no. Is that sort of coming in? Are you sort of seeing that come into therapy a bit as well?
Yeah, I think it's coming in lots of different ways. Absolutely, it's coming in. It's coming in sometimes negative ways because there are lots of people, men and women, it's mostly women, but who are being triggered from the seeing what's happening in the press, and then it's bringing back memories that perhaps they've repressed, and the Brett Kavanaugh or whatever it may be that's being portrayed in the press, and actually people are coming in and it's touching them in a way. I mean, it's touching all of us in different ways, but that's one way. And yes, I think you're right that we men, I'm a man, but men are also in some respects, you've got some men who get it, and then there are other men who, like you say, are confused. And I don't think there's that much to be confused about. Maybe because I'm in the field, but there probably is some education that needs to go on so that men understand this hierarchical gender balance, the way things have been set up. And I think it's just the fact that we haven't had to think about it. Until someone actually said to me a while back, this was kind of, pre-Me Too, think about this, Gavin. I get up, we were having a very lighthearted conversation about this whole thing, which France, I think has now made illegal, about wolf whistling.
Mm-hmm.
You wolf whistle at someone. And there's lots of men that go, oh, this is just harmless. What's a harmless wolf whistle? And at first was explained to me, this was before I was a therapist, but by someone saying, well, I get up in the morning at, 7 o'clock and I walk to the station and someone wolf whistles at me. And I think, okay, well, it's not so bad. Then I get on the bus and somebody's objectifying me and they're looking at me in a way that makes me feel really uncomfortable. Then I get off and I start walking to work and someone else starts saying, hey, show us your legs, or that sort of harmless quote banter that starts. And by the time I've got to work, I've had 10 separate incidents that all on their own, sure, they're not traumatic, but each one of those, when you put them together, this is quite distressing. And I don't think we as men, we've ever had to think about just that. And so, I think your point is an interesting one, that there's a lot here both for men and women. I mean, now I see it different through the lens as a therapist as well as a man, but there's a lot for us to think about. And so when men then start to say, well, it's really confusing, I don't know what I can and can't do anymore, then I kind of get my therapist cap on and I say, well, it's pretty obvious, because if you want to flirt, by all means flirt, but if the answer is no, then the answer is no, so you know where to stop. And if it's with someone in your workplace and you're in a superior position, well, think again, because that's an abuse of power. So all those things that probably men haven't had to think about, but they certainly need to, and it's about time.
Yeah, like you say.
I sound like I was on my soapbox then. Sorry.
No, not at all. No, I think it is logical. And I think that everyone agrees that 99% of people, either men or women, they're not crossing those lines. They know not to. But it's just that final percentage can cause such trauma to someone's life. In the real extreme cases, not necessarily just the wolf whistle, but like you say, it's the whole picture. And interestingly, as a mum I have a boy and a girl, so what of course I'm doing is teaching my daughter avoidance tactics. Don't wear this. But what's interesting is that she's coming back at me, 14, strong, fierce female, now saying, why shouldn't I? It's my right. Why can't I? Yeah. And it's really provoking very interesting discussions at home that on the one hand, I'm super proud of, but on the other hand, as a protective mum, you're like, yeah, well. And then on the other hand, I've got the son, again, both teenagers, and we're sort of, obviously, like all parents have done through the ages, but even more so now, talking about respect, when a no is a no, and looking for those signals and those kind of things. So I think that things have changed, certainly compared to, say, when I was brought up. I don't know what my parents, whether they were having all these same conversations with both the girls and boys in my family, but I think that's what we're doing now. Moving forward, I hope.
Yeah, and it is an interesting point as a parent because, on one hand, your daughter's absolutely right. Why should she not wear a skirt at whatever length she feels comfortable, assuming it's whether it's school or she's going out, that the setting's appropriate. But why should she not be able to do that? And yet, absolutely, there's the nurturing, caring parent of knowing that some men are predatory. Some women are predatory, some men are predatory, and therefore you want to be able to protect. And you made a point there about sort of the 1%, and I think we don't want to stop people flirting, or and then we can get it wrong. We can ask someone out who's not available, and that's that to me isn't the grey. That's that's where we come alive in relationships, when we flirt and to be able to have those relationships. And of course, what we can't know is that we ask someone out or we say something, and if that person does have trauma, it can be triggering. And that's, to me, where it gets a little grey, that a man has innocently asked someone out, and in that moment, something may happen for her that is triggering because of past trauma. And, there are no easy answers. We are in a minefield, and that's where it's tricky. But
and there really are no answers. If you go to any bookstore and you look at all the self-help books for love, they haven't got one. There's just hundreds and hundreds. And I came across a piece of paper this morning. It fell out of my old file of facts, so that dates already how old that piece of paper was. I wrote it when I was about 18, around that kind of age. So, and it was sort of my Pinterest, if you like, from 18 years old, because Pinterest didn't exist then. So it was my quotes. I'd written some quotes, and I thought it was really interesting. So here's one: was the basic human desire is to live, love, and be loved. And another one was there's no power to rival a human's love. And what's so interesting is that it hasn't changed from 18 to my age. Now, for hundreds of thousands of years, we've been dealing with this problem of love and the relationships. And there is no one book, is there? And we do get it wrong. We all have got it wrong over the years, otherwise we'd be married to the first person we went out with, which most of us aren't.
Yeah, well, I was just thinking then as you were reading your beautiful quotes, I need you to do the copywriting for my website. You're right. We all, I was doing the seminar last week about love, and I started by talking about so why do we fall in love? And that's where so much of this starts. The desire. We come into the world. We are hardwired to seek connection, and we spend a large part of our life living in fear of losing the emotional connection with our partners, with our loved ones, and just wanting to maintain that emotional connection. And that's why your quote, if someone's reading it in 20 or 30 years' time, it's going to be just as relevant.
And that's why I think we are better now at asking for help. So coming to therapists, self-help groups, self-help books, talking with friends. I think traditionally women were maybe more likely to talk about things, but I see men much more doing it than they used to. Say my dad wouldn't necessarily be down the pub talking about relationship issues, I don't think, whereas this generation, our generation, which is brilliant, and I'm encouraging the future generations to do so. Obviously, we could actually talk probably for a week about this subject, I'm sure, about unhealthy relationships, that kind of thing. Have you got any little tips or things that people could be looking at their current relationships right now, just to share with us before I want to then talk about how to choose a therapist, because I think that's quite an important area to discuss.
I think what I would say is, in terms of a tip for relationships, maybe if I could just turn it on its head slightly. When we are isolated and we're struggling in relationships, sometimes the thing that will really help us get out can be a combination. It can be one-to-one therapy, which we'll talk about. But almost as important, maybe even more important, is connection. Because what we do when we get into these unhealthy relationships is we carry a lot of shame. That if our friends, if our acquaintances really knew what was going on behind closed doors or what I put up with, then I'd really be rejected. So we normalize things. We have a lot of shame that, because, we assume that everyone else is out there having, great sex 10 times a day and we're not. And so we don't have any context. So one of the things I would urge people to do, and I'm looking to start at least one or two of them. There are some here, there aren't a lot, but try and find groups. And this triggers another thing about living in the south of France, that someone will say, well, I'm really nervous to go to a group because what happens if someone sees me? I hear that a lot, particularly if someone's going to go to a 12-step group, to which my reply is, well, if they're there for the same reason. But of course, the reason groups, there's a lot of research that shows our brains just respond so much quicker. We build better new neural pathways when we emotionally connect with other people, and we do it really well in groups. It's really can help reduce our shame and begin to allow us to trust, and then we have the strength to confront a relationship. Because if we don't have that many people here and we're isolated, sometimes staying in a bad relationship, it kind of feels better than being completely isolated.
Yeah, I can see that. I can see it from a business perspective, because I meet with business people and we have to share in that, and we're sharing sometimes very private, vulnerable stuff about our businesses in order to get solutions to move forward. And we're all internationals in that group, and we do say each time, whatever we get said here stays here. Because you don't want them going down the pub going, you never guess what. It's a really important part, I imagine, the confidentiality of the group.
Absolutely.
But I can see as well the power of the group is, I can see just in the business group I belong to how positive that is. And I've done them for education meetups and things like that, the mum and baby meetups. The power of the group, it's everything, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we talked a bit about the groups and how, that worry, because that was one of my questions is, are people worried about going to a group and seeing someone that they know through social media or through their boot camp in the group? So I get that one now. How does one go about choosing the right kind of therapist? Because although there aren't that many English-speaking therapists here on the Côte d'Azur, you still got to pick the phone up and choose one, or try and sense it from the website. What would you recommend as the approach there?
So I would say once you've identified, so through, good old Google, once you've identified that geographically that, there are 2 or 3 people that you could travel to, and it's not like living in a city in the UK. If I'm in Leeds or Manchester or London, I've probably got access to one on my doorstep. So there's probably going to be some travel. And then I would say 2 things. I'd say have a look at the website, see if you can get a flavor of what that person does. Is there something there that stands out for you, that resonates? And I would say then most importantly, I would go and meet a couple, 2 or 3 therapists, have an initial session, and then go by your gut. You will not know after one meeting, this is the person who's going to get me to better mental health. You may not even be 100% sure that therapy is for me, but if you're going to commit to it, at least for a period of time, go and see, and maybe see different gender if you can. So go and see, there's probably more female than there are male. And then just trust your gut. When I sit in front of this person, do I have a sense that I feel safe, that I feel held, that I can come here and I can be messy and I can be me and not feel judged? And all of that feels like a big ask from one session. It's usually a double session, at least for me, the first time. But just trust your intuition, because you will have a sense.
Brilliant. That's really, really helpful. So if they want to check out your website, I mentioned at the beginning, but it's livelovelearn.global. That's right, isn't it?
That's right. Yep.
Well, I want to, another time we'll get together and we'll talk about some of the other topics. So porn on the internet, which now that all the teenagers have got their own smartphones and access to their own personal computers in their bedroom, it must be huge, and it's going to be a problem that's going to get even bigger, I'd say, as we learn to handle these smart devices that they have access to. That everyone has access to. I mean, I'm not just saying the teenagers, it's everyone has access to that. But on a lighter note, just to finish up with, let's talk a little bit about why you came to the Côte d'Azur, what you love about living here. Any things that you want to share with us about the Côte d'Azur? I've been here for 3 years. I'm still in that honeymoon period. I met someone the other day who's been here for 15 years, and she said it hasn't ended. So I'm hoping that it won't end. But I had a career in the city first. I did that. I was a bit of a workaholic, and I did that for probably best part of 15 plus years. This was my second career, and it just timed that really well, that rather than living in, this is not offensive to anybody who's listening and lives in London. I'm guessing most people are going to live here. I live in London, which is a fabulous and vibrant and colourful city, and I couldn't wait to leave because the being stuck on the underground and all of that stuff. So I think it was really just that, we get one shot at life. It's not a dress rehearsal, and it was that. If I'm fortunate enough to be able to try and make a go of it here in the sun,
then, hey, why not? So it was really as simple as that.
I love that. That resonates hugely with me, because I totally agree in this. Well, I do think, we've got the one life. That's my personal belief, and you got to make the most of it. This one shot at it. And through the years, if I've had really rubbish jobs in the past. I remember in my 20s, I used to sell peepholes door to door. I lasted one day, didn't go very well, but I didn't carry on doing it because I knew it wasn't going to be for me forever. And, that was just a summer job, what have you. I think I was the bun lady another summer job when I was a student, going from office to office, selling sandwiches. And when they used to beep through to everyone in the office and go, "The bun lady's here," I was like, oh my gosh, I need to get out. I've got to change my, where I'm going in life. And I really believe in this sort of, with the end in mind. So even if I was going to do in a year's time, where do I want to be in a year's time? What would I like to be doing? Who would I like to be with? How would I like to be feeling? What car would I like to be driving? And then coming back to today and going, okay, we can do that. And then what are the steps to get to there? And I guess that really that's the same thing in relationship therapy, in addiction, in porn issues, all those kind of things, is that you've got to first of all agree that you've got an issue, and then go and speak to someone like you, and with a view to sorting those things out so that you can move on and enjoy this amazing place that we live in.
And, just responding to that, by the way, I like Antonia, the bun lady. That's how I'm going to refer to you now. There's also something about which is a work in progress for all of us, myself included, being able to let go of control. And so many people said, well, how long are you going to live there for? Or, I don't know. What if it doesn't work out? I don't know. And of course, there are some plans. It's not completely reckless, but it's also, and this happens a lot in therapy, it's having the confidence and faith sometimes in the universe, and having a higher power, or whatever you want to call it, but just being able to say, okay, I don't need to know everything. Yes, there are practical realities. We all need to know, how do we pay our mortgages? How are we going to get by? But beyond that, actually, if I can live in the not knowing, and I can have fun being in that moment, then life and the journey becomes a bit more fun. And that's, as I say, it's a work in progress. I don't pretend that either it's always fun or I've got it mastered, but that's what I work towards.
No, and I'm the same. I look out the window and I think it's a beautiful sunny day, and then here I am inside recording a podcast. So there is an irony in that too. No, and I'm having a great time connecting with you. But it's not all pina coladas on the beach all the time. But it's embracing. I find it really challenging myself personally to be mindful. But I do try to remind myself to enjoy the moments as they're happening as much as possible. Are you more a sea person or a mountain person? Have you managed to discover a bit of both yet in your time here?
I think I don't climb the mountains, but I like to look at them. I think I'm a sea person. I think if I'm lucky enough to always have the choice, I think I would always want to live close to the sea. And I know when I come back from London, and the moment that the car, just as you reach that point in Ayers, where you start to see the sea, and I can almost feel myself just take that breath, and it's just, I'm home. And so there's something for me which is strange, because I never grew up by the sea, and I do believe in one life, but maybe there was another life where I lived by the sea. But there is something that is so, that really, it's going to sound terribly cliche, but it really feeds my soul. I love to look at the water. So when I need to do that, I'll take the dogs, I'll go for a walk, be by the sea, and it's just, it's very special.
Well, it's magical, and it's always changing as well. So it's, you can be there in winter and it can be angry, and then you can be there in the turquoise azure blue and have a totally different experience. Yeah, we are very, very lucky to live here. Are you a reader, a big reader, or?
This is going to sound a little sad. I am, but I tend to read a lot of books kind of in my field, because I need to stay kind of up to date. So, someone kind of relaxing might go read a storybook, and I'm relaxing reading, a book on substance abuse or suicide or death. But so I read a lot. I read usually within my field, which is it's not sad, because I enjoy it.
Yeah, no, I get that. I do too. So, but when I'm around in the summer holidays around the pool, that's when I get those sort of fast chick lit reads out the way. And I joined
Yeah.
a book club actually. That was a way that I met loads of people that I wouldn't necessarily. I don't think any of us would have naturally come together as a group, except for the fact that there was this book club that pulled us together. It's been going about 8 years or something crazy now. Great way to meet people. If anyone's listening and they're thinking about being a bit isolated, it gives you something to talk about in those early days and to bond with, and different opinions. And there's loads of people on Côte d'Azur living looking for joining them, those kind of things. So it's a good thing to do. I don't know if you've got any other tips for meeting people.
Yeah, I would say the infamous Facebook, type in Riviera and look for all the different groups, because there are so many, and we're not going to love every one of them. But some people will go to the Internations meetup, or just go on to meetup.com, and there is kind of in the Riviera there'll be sailing, there'll be Beverly Holt does all wonderful workshops around kind of Reiki and healing, and so just absolutely try different workshops, and most, from what I've heard and through my own experience, most people, because we've all had to come here at some point and make a start, and we all have that little bit of social anxiety of, will I be accepted into that group? So that's normal, but because we've all been here, we've all been expats. Most people's experience, it may not be that I like that particular group or I like this one more, but people are usually quite welcoming. So absolutely book clubs, meetups, all those different groups. And if you can do it around a hobby, you'll feel more comfortable. So, if you love sailing, find the Riviera sailing group or find the equivalent, because then you'll be more relaxed doing something that's authentic, and it's you.
Brilliant. Well, I think everyone listening now should think about 2019 is just around the corner. It's a great moment right now, I think, to be thinking about how you want next year to pan out, so that you can start doing some of the actions now. You don't need to wait till January.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So remind us again how we can get in touch with you and find out more about everything that you do.
So best way would be to email me. It's gavin@livelovelearn.global, all one word, or just have a look at the website. My phone number's on there. If you prefer to call, that's also fine. If you're not sure about whether the therapy is for you, or there's any part of this podcast that you want to know more about, then I am more than happy to speak on the phone, to email, to help.
Brilliant. Gavin, thank you ever so much for your time and joining us on the Riviera Firefly podcast.
Thank you for having me, and I look forward to the next one. Thank you, Bun. What was it? What do we say? It was Bun Girl and Bun Girl Antonia.
The Bun Girl, wicked. Yeah, new hashtag. Thanks.
All right. Thank you very much. Thanks.
The Riviera Firefly podcast appreciates every contributor and listener. Your comments, likes, and shares make us really happy and inspire us to keep doing the shows. Come join us in our free community groups on Facebook, Côte d'Azur Living, for all things south of France, and for those running a business, you need to join the Riviera Firefly Business Cocoon. It's totally free. The costs of producing and hosting this podcast are funded by Kidduland. Nicknamed by their clients the Little English School, they organise fun activities all in English for 0 to 16-year-olds, from baby clubs and playgroups to English lessons and holiday camps. They even hold workshops for adults too, right here on the Côte d'Azur. You can find out more about Kidduland directly on their website www.kidduland.com. So thanks for listening. Please do pay it forward and share an episode so we can spread the Côte d'Azur love. Until next time, Fireflies, au revoir!